I'm going to give you a bunch of tangible, pragmatic information. There's going to be a ton of it, and we're going to make sure it's available outside of it. But I'm going to go really quickly because right now is one of the most important times for the operators in this space to be informed about what the opportunities and the challenges are. From my perspective, our challenges are our opportunities. All eyes are on Oregon, and it is our challenge to create a system that can weave the space that is creating a program for the first time that embodies safety while simultaneously ensuring that those who stand and benefit most from having access to this program have it, and that we continue to expand all of that access in a responsible way. So really quickly, the Healing Advocacy Fund. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting the thoughtful and effective development of this entire program here in Oregon. What's it going to take? I cannot tell you how many times I get asked that question, and it's the right question. Let's start with education. This is often a thing that people think we do once and we're done. We did a lot of education to win the campaign, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that model it continues to be important now. We won the campaign in November, but that was phase one of the education that we need to do. How did we win the campaign in November? We answered these 5 questions. First, what is psilocybin? Probably doesn't surprise anyone here that a lot of people have no idea what psilocybin is or how to pronounce it. Many of us probably might disagree righteously on how to pronounce it. What does the research say? Right? When we're talking to Oregon voters, they want to be able to look at something that they already are comfortable with. They need credibility, right? This is where we are able to point to the clinical studies that are coming out of prestigious institutions across the country and say, it's not just us that are showing the real benefits that psilocybin can have. The next 2 questions are factual. What does this measure do and what does it not do? As an adult use cannabis state, there is a lot of knee-jerk reactions, understandably so, that this is an adult use retail program. We all know that is not the case. We need to inform people on that continuously. And last but certainly not least, who stands to benefit from having access? And when all of these things come together in one place, we're able to provide a foundation of information that has credibility, and we're able to pull on the heartstrings of the people who are making decisions. You don't have to be a supporter of psilocybin to support creating access to psilocybin, and that's what we learned. Everyone knows someone who stands to benefit from psilocybin that they love. And when we can present that narrative to the general public, we can win. And it's important that we continue to send that message at the local, state, and national levels. This is truly a basic recipe for how to continue to win in a responsible way. So really quickly, I'm going to breeze through some of these stats, but I just wanted to share what drove yes voters. Basically a reflection of what I just said. The research, who it can help, and continued organizing. Some of the education that we've done so far. This is some of the polling that we did after the campaign passed to get a sense of how exactly did this happen. We had some ideas, but the education and the numbers that we saw in early October, for example, the question, I am familiar with a substance known as psilocybin. 37% of Oregon voters said yes to that. After the campaign, 63% changed, right? Additional questions. Psilocybin can be used to help treat mental health conditions. Psilocybin is the subject of serious scientific research. We keep seeing these numbers go up. The thing is, 2 years go by, these numbers are probably significantly different. This is why the continuation of education is essential at every level and that we never stop, right? Not just for us, but for everyone else who is deciding whether or not, from a legal perspective, we get to move forward in creating access within this new path that Measure 109 is creating through licensed and regulated program. So you've probably seen this map a couple of times. I highlight this map to show the counties in which Measure 109 had a majority of support in. I'm going to talk a lot about this, but the number one theme that I want you to take away from this is that psychedelics, and here in Oregon, specific to psilocybin, is transcending partisan politics in a way that no other drug policy issue, at least referring to cannabis, has been able to do. When we legalized cannabis in Oregon, 2, maybe 3 counties voted in favor. Almost half of all Oregon counties voted in favor of Measure 109. That is not something to sneeze at. That is a big deal. We have a lot of work to do, especially in these rural communities that may already have an incredibly hard time accessing any type of care at all. If you live here in Oregon, you may have heard recently 911 call stations are not available in some of these counties recently. We are going to face those same problems, and it's important that we're acknowledging them up front, early and often, and we're working directly with those communities on the ground. Communication. People ask you, what have you been up to? This. I'm that guy that shows up at city council meetings and county meetings, helping people understand the answers to all of the questions that we've just walked through. Again, we won at the state level. We have to continue to defend our win at the local level. Under Measure 109, as you've heard, cities and counties have the ability to opt out of the program. Luckily, we knew that we needed to be able to insert something in a Measure 109 that made it a little harder for people to just opt out. So there will be a number of cities and counties that will be opting out, or that will be putting the question to voters to opt out this November. How many people here live in Oregon in a county or a city in which they're opting out? They're looking to opt out. A handful? Okay. We can help provide resources and education and connect you with other people in your areas. We are not able to be the boots on the ground, but we have resources and we have connections, and it will be grassroots community and fundraising and all of the things that I said before that will help us continue to defend the wins that we have and the gains we've made thus far. Again, when it comes to communication, we really started to see that the media was even less informed than the average voter. And so we spent a whole lot of time educating the media, and over the last 6 months, we have been able to help change the narrative from, what the hell is going on, what is psilocybin, to they were using our talking points. They were the ones, without having to talk to any of us, utilizing the clinical research, highlighting what the program is not. It is not a retail sales type of environment, which made our job a little bit easier in communicating with elected officials at the city and county level and helping them understand the opportunity that we have moving forward. So a lot of this is still taking place right now. A couple of these are examples in which, in Deschutes County, unfortunately, Deschutes County has something on the ballot to opt out this year. I also want to use this as an example of how incredibly proud I am of the folks in Deschutes County and Jackson County and others that have showed up in droves, testifying to their elected officials, letting them know there are people in this community that supported you because we expect you to stand up for what we need in our community. And we're going to need to continue to do that and not let our foot off the gas when it comes to holding elected officials accountable to the will of their voters. I also want to highlight another perfect example of how psychedelics are transcending partisan politics. There have been numerous cases in different cities and counties where, maybe a city or a county didn't vote in favor of Measure 109. Yamhill County, 50.1% voted yes. Luckily, there was a very friendly commissioner on the Yamhill County Commission who basically called us up and said, hey, we would love you to give a presentation on what this is and what it isn't. The chair of that county is a very well-known, incredibly conservative Republican. And she ended up championing access to psilocybin therapy in Yamhill County. That's huge. That's not just conservatives and Republicans rallying around veterans, which we're seeing a lot more these days. That is a full-fledged endorsement that says it does not matter what party I'm affiliated with. We all stand to benefit or know someone who stands to benefit from having access. Oh, it's the wrong button, that's why. So another quick example, Washington County Flip side, 60% voted yes on Measure 109. They damn near opted out without any input at all, right? So this was another example where we were able to very quickly educate Commissioner Harrington, who also happened to be the chair of the entire commission. And not only did she take about 20 minutes to do some Googling, as you can see on her own, but she championed it. She literally says, all you have to do is Google this, and the information's there. Do your homework, fellow commissioners, which is great, because we can't really say that. But this is just another really good example of how a little bit of targeted effort can go a really long ways. And if anyone's familiar with the 80-20 principle, this is it. And in terms of all of the work that we have to do in these local levels, we need as much 80-20 principle as we can get. So, local control. Not like I haven't already been talking about that enough, but let's really dive in a little bit to some of the tangibles about what cities can and cannot do. It's very important that people understand this, especially if you are looking at real estate to purchase property, if you're looking to be an operator, if you're looking to figure out how to actually get involved in your community. Your business is politics, and all politics are local. And if you are not paying attention to the politics right now, you're not paying attention to your business. Plain and simple. Local governments can determine time, place, and manner, and they can do it separately for manufacturers and service centers. They do not have the authority to directly place any local regulations on testing labs or training programs. So very important distinctions. Some of the lessons we learned from cannabis that we included here that we do not allow local governments to weigh in on. They cannot create their own license type. We saw that in cannabis. It was one of the biggest barriers to access financially, legally. I could go on, right? We eliminated that. They cannot create a duplicative licensing system just to do a cash grab for a new industry. That is not allowed under Measure 109. Number two, they can't opt out without voter approval. Again, this provides another opportunity for us to engage with the public to ensure that if elected leaders put something on the ballot, that they understand they might be held accountable for their decisions. And that's one of the things that a lot of great folks here are in their own communities doing on the ground in an incredibly big and important way. Last but not least, I already said that one, so I'm going to move on. So really quickly, I also want to highlight the narrative that we might hear in the media right now. A slight majority of counties are opting out of this program. Technically true. I want to talk about the positives that we've seen due to the work of so many local activists in this room. 144 cities are going to allow access. 10 counties are starting to allow access. This is a good starting point. Do we want to continue to expand access? Yes, absolutely. But 17 out of the 20 most populated cities in Oregon are moving forward with this program. What does that equate to? Around 2 million people potentially having access over the next couple of years in Oregon. That's a big deal. That is something that is worth focusing on and figuring out how to continue to empower that momentum so it can spread throughout the state and we can continue to transcend partisan politics and bring people together. We've heard so much about the opportunity that this program has to bring people together, and I truly think that through the wins that we're seeing at the local government, we can get there. And that's the conclusion of my talk. I also want to mention we're here to be a resource. Whether you're an operator, you're a training program, you're trying to figure out what the hell Section 72, line A of the measure means. These are things that we can help with, right? And we really encourage you to reach out. You can visit healingadvocacyfund.org to get a hold of us. And thank you, everyone, for everything that you've done for this entire program.
Sam can get us fired up. I heard him give fired up remarks sitting on the table of a co-op in Eugene. I think Occupy Wall Street, some other stuff. I can confirm, as Sam noted, he is that guy. You can ask me later about how we met in 2009 on the silent floor of the law library in Eugene, but maybe at the after party. All right, I can also confirm that our next guest, you've already heard from, is certified amazing, doing very important work, has already done a lot of incredible work, and is now the president of the Healing Advocacy Fund. We've got Alice Liu. She's focused on building programs to support the stakeholders, building the Oregon psilocybin ecosystem from the ground up. Alice previously served in leadership roles with several mental health and social impact organizations, built a mission-driven startup, worked in impact investing and philanthropy, helped build a global center of excellence for entrepreneur mental health, and worked on the implications and had her work on the implications of artificial intelligence featured at TED, and helped build a National Geographic TV series on the developing world. Let's give a hand for Alice.
Thanks, Nate. So Sam just talked about the policy side of things, how all those elements will impact our space. I'm going to focus on what it's going to take for professional stakeholders or those wanting to work in this space. That's those facilitators, training schools, service centers, test labs, manufacturers, to get set up over the next 2 years. And there are 5 areas I want to cover. So number 1, setup. How do we actually help these professionals and organizations get themselves set up? I think a lot of you are probably thinking, along with me, that service centers are probably going to be some of the most complex and challenging ones to set up. Many of these folks are going to be first-time entrepreneurs. That's already a challenging role, never mind the complexities of working with a scheduled substance. So our team is really interested in figuring out how do we make that process as streamlined and easeful as possible. As one very simple example, there are probably 50 people in this room right now working in their own silos to set up service centers who are asking the same questions to the same lawyers and accountants and spending a lot of their own time and money to do that. That's probably something we can streamline together. And I really think that a meaningful chunk of this work could be shared effort, whether it's creating a central toolkit on legal and compliance topics, building shared templates for intake or screening as an example, or actively sharing protocols and solutions that we continue to create together. So if you're starting a service center and you want to join our collaboratives and programs, please come talk to us, hit us up on our website to reach out. And second with setup, I think access to funding I see as one of the biggest challenges we're going to face for any state legal initiative, whether it's our community here, if the Colorado ballot measure passes, any other ballot measures or state initiatives in the next 10 years. So I think, as you've seen from this week, service centers are really going to have challenges with banking, with debt, with investment. For many of them, I really feel that given the work that we're doing and the way we really want it to be aligned, patient capital and impact loans could be really critical to getting a lot more service centers set up. And there is no central effort that I've seen yet to coordinate this. In a similar way, I think real estate is going to be a challenge for service centers. So if you're someone who's really interested in thinking about how to coordinate aligned capital or real estate around service centers, please come talk to us. So number 2, quality. Once these organizations get set up, and as they're getting set up, how do we support these organizations so that they're not just meeting the bare minimum regulatory requirements, but they're able to be supported in crafting offerings with the best wisdom that we already have out there? We already have so many best practices from ketamine, from clinical trials in academia, from underground, from religious use, from harm reduction. We don't have to recreate the wheel here. And we'll also be learning so much in this community and creating new standards and best practices that haven't been created before. So let's do as much open sharing as possible and lift all boats. Number 3, safety. So Brian Anderson just talked about this, but just from our perspective, how do we make sure that we make the system as safe as we can? We, as Brian mentioned, expect statistically, just like in any other field, that there will be some folks who experience adverse outcomes and outcomes at different levels of intensity. So let's proactively plan for those rare but expected situations. Whoop, page change. And I really think this topic could be a whole 4-day conference in itself, but at a high level, it means things like making sure clients are educated on whether psilocybin is right for them, what to expect, and how to create supportive networks of care around themselves. It means ensuring that folks who have risk factors move through the system safely. It means creating good protocols for when a facilitator needs to escalate something that grows out of their scope of expertise, having systems of accountability for facilitators in case of ethical violations or other substandard behavior. and taking a look at where the biggest gaps in our safety net are and catalyzing solutions around that. And again, that's really something we need our whole community to come together to do. It's not something someone can really solve in a silo individually. Number 4, education. You've already heard Sam talk a lot about that in terms of the general public and press and policymakers. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the second-order stakeholders that are really going to be interacting with this community. And that's clinicians, so all the medical doctors in this state, psychotherapists, social workers. I think we have 11,000 licensed clinicians in the state right now. It means healthcare networks and emergency departments, emergency responders, and law enforcement. We need to give all these folks in our ideal world a Psychedelics 101 training so that they know how psilocybin works, ideally how other psychedelics work as well, and how to best work with people in their line of work who are experiencing psilocybin. And become part of a supportive network for these clients instead of causing unintentional harm. And last but not least, access. So Dr. Carter, after me, is going to talk in depth about equity and access, but I'll just say that scholarships for facilitators to get trained and licensed will be really valuable for the overall health and vibrancy of our community, especially folks from diverse or marginalized backgrounds, especially folks with existing mental health training, and especially folks who already have experience in psychedelic facilitation and want to qualify to practice under M109. The Cherie Eckert Foundation, which Nate is part of, is doing great work in this area, and HAF is also planning on launching a fellowship program for the same purpose. And a second piece on access is, what are all the ways we can bring costs down for clients while not adding strain to facilitators to get paid fairly and to make sure we are mindful of the burnout that we're seeing across psychedelic facilitation right now. This is a real challenge in this space. The good news is there are a lot of people thinking about creative solutions to this. So probably the common ones you've been hearing about are scholarships, sliding scales, payment plans. Obviously, group facilitation will make this more accessible and is also an enriching experience in itself. But I really want to know what else people are experimenting on. I've heard a few ideas from this community already, and I think this is a major area where we could really start sharing ideas together for the benefit of all. So I really think that community is what's going to make this ecosystem thrive and even make it possible. I think one way to think about this, which is sort of the game A capitalism way of thinking about this, is that the service centers are in competition with each other. Another lens is, though, that if only 5% of our service centers succeed, that's not a healthy ecosystem. They're not winning. Nobody else is winning either. So I really feel that we need to support each other, share everything we're learning, do case consultations with each other, share referrals, basically do the professional equivalent of a potluck. That's how we can continue to thrive, and that this state can develop a glowing reputation with the general public nationally, with policymakers, and with the media, so that everybody sees that this model works. Now, everything I just talked about are topics we're interested in working on at HAF, so whether we end up being the ones to build them or we're just part of catalyzing the solution, please, if you're interested in contributing to any of these topics, we'd love to hear from you. And I'll just end with this. If we do this right, we'll be setting an example where Oregon becomes a center of excellence for psychedelic therapy. Not many people yet are talking about the fact that if MDMA gets FDA approved, this will be the first place in the country where, at a wide scale, our facilitators will be able to practice psilocybin and ketamine and MDMA, which means that some of the most experienced above-ground facilitators in this country are probably sitting in this room right now, and that's where they'll be 10 years from now. And the practitioners here will also be serving a wider range of folks than clinical trials and FDA-approved medical models can capture, and bringing healing to many more people and many more styles of facilitation. This has never been done before, which is really exciting. We are pioneers who have an opportunity to run experiments and to forge new pathways that will advance our entire field. So let's do this together.
Why you gotta make me feel so hopeful, Alice? Collaboration over competition. Collaboration, not competition. You all are building incredible programming that really embodies that. Thank you. Super cool. Another powerhouse, beam of light, earthling. We have up next Dr. Angela Carter, they, them. Angela is a white, queer, genderqueer, neuroqueer, intersex, transformative justice activist, and naturopathic physician in service to Oregon as the program and implementation manager for the Measure 110 substance use treatment and recovery program within the Oregon Health Authority. Yeah. Big job. Big job. Dr. Carter also sits on the Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board as a vice chair, chair of the training subcommittee, and co-chair of the equity subcommittee. Angela does not sleep, apparently. They are a founding member of the chair emeritus of the Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, Transgender Health Programs Community for Advisory Board, and serve on the board of advisors for the Alma Training Institute for Psilocybin Facilitation. Dr. Carter also enjoys the company of cats, crocheting, and getting lost in the woods looking for mushrooms. It is my pleasure to announce Angie Carter, Dr. Carter. Here we go. You got one moment. Hello? Is it back on? If you want to ask questions for the panel after Dr. Carter is done talking, take a photo of the QR code on the back of your name tag.
Hi, everybody. Wow, there's so many folks. That's so exciting. It's amazing to see you all here, sort of hard with the lights. A little context, I am sort of at a fine balance between being comfortable and conscious. I have some herniated discs in my neck, and so I'm a little bit towards the comfortable side, so my apologies if I'm a little bit slow today. So the question is, how do we make the program successful? And I will start with defining my ideal for success. I don't come from an economic success perspective. I really, because of who I am, because of the people that I serve, primarily being people who experience multiple intersectional marginalities because of systemic oppression, my ideal of success for this program is really how well it serves people in their ability to heal and connect with each other, and heal is a larger concept than just, the single person, the single body. It's healing the culture, really. I recognize that psilocybin is a facilitator of healing and connection for both individual and collective liberation from oppression. Psilocybin has the potential to heal the impacts of trauma due to marginalization for individuals and also for communities. It promotes the connection between people that is needed to organize against systemic oppression and make changes to systems that are necessary to overcome the oppression that causes the trauma that we're all here to treat. And so I will start with probably an unpopular opinion, which is that in order to create equity, well, basically we can't create equity in a system that is set within a larger system that has deep roots of inequity. It's just, basically there is no ethical consumption or equity under capitalism. And yet here we are. And this is the system that we have to work with. But until we change that system, all of our equity efforts will be Band-Aids. We have to expand what we're doing here out to the larger system and apply what we learn about healing, about connection, about transformation to the entire country, to the entire world, to all of the systems in place that hold people back from healing and being their true selves. And so, we are working with Band-Aids right now, but there are a number of things that we can do to really optimize the system that we're working with, and mostly that involves, being like mushrooms, creating mycelial networks, connecting with each other, and finding ways to support each other and lift each other up in the work that we're doing. So, for starters, we have to create the best possible equity in accessing services. We know that communities that experience the highest levels of marginalization have the highest burden of mental health concerns. Trauma begets mental health concerns. And in order to actually create equity in this system, we have to provide culturally specific, trauma-informed, and language-accessible psilocybin services and integration. So, in order to do that, we need to have facilitators who have lived experience of trauma, of marginalization, of mental health concerns, of substance use concerns, people who have lived through and understand the experience that we are trying to help to heal. And in order to do that, we need to really recruit and promote and support people who are from those marginalized communities. We need to find ways to help people of color who don't have intergenerational wealth because the war on drugs took that from them. We need to help the queer community. We need to help people with disabilities, people who are immigrants. All of these people have the lived experience of being traumatized by the system, and we need them to be there to support the people who need to heal from the trauma of the system. And so, in order to do that, we need to provide funding, we need to provide scholarships, we need to provide systems that offer support in ways that are above and beyond. We need scholarships, we need to promote people entering fields, not just psilocybin facilitation, but also agriculture and bench chemistry and mental health care and research and business management. We need to promote this across the board. And we need to find ways to provide grants and microloans, creating collectives, and giving people sliding scale options for businesses that are startups that are owned and operated by marginalized community members. We need to provide scholarships and access to alternative ways to fund accessing psilocybin services, and I'm fully 100% for this not being a medical model, but in certain instances, people are not going to have access unless they use what they have to use, which is insurance, Medicaid. Medicaid needs to cover this from one perspective or another, until we figure out a different way for this system to be organized, and people who do not have access to funds to get these services, we have to find a way for them to get them. And so one way, maybe I'll jump around here, one way is to integrate this work into some of the systems that are already in existence to provide more equity. Basically, we have a number of programs, I think about half, that are geared specifically towards people with advanced degrees in medicine or mental health. And that is useful. We need a diverse set of providers, but we also need providers who are not a part of the medical model and don't come from that perspective. There are a lot of people who have been traumatized by Western medicine and do not want to take part in it, do not want to be around it unless they absolutely have to because of fear of being re-traumatized. There are a lot of people who have different understandings of health and medicine, different paradigms. Western medicine has a haughtiness to it that there's a belief that it is the only right way, where there are hundreds of different systems of understanding the body, understanding medicine around the world, and they're all relevant and applicable and need to be acknowledged. So one option would be we have a system here in Oregon, traditional health workers. Traditional health workers are people with lived experience of mental health issues, substance use, and lived experience of a lot of them of marginalization. These folks are licensed by the state of Oregon. They receive training in trauma-informed care and mentorship and providing emotional support, helping people reconstruct their narratives, providing empowerment, connection to community, and referral to medicine if needed. But dual licensure as a traditional health worker and a facilitator would provide an opportunity to bill insurance from a non-medical perspective. Medicaid pays $15 to $21 per 15-minute increment for peer support services. And so having that dual licensure would provide an opportunity for many people who do not have the opportunity or the intergenerational wealth to pay for an advanced medical degree to receive a reasonable amount for their facilitation services. And I would take it a step further. I am speaking not as the manager for the Measure 110 program at this point, but I would like to encourage the Measure 110 Oversight and Accountability Council to consider using some of the grant funds that are provided through cannabis taxes in our state that have no connection to federal funds to allow peer support specialists who are employed in the behavioral health resource networks that make up our Measure 110 program to provide peer support facilitation to people who are struggling with substance use. And I'm out of time, but I would say, we need support for facilitators. We need support to help them connect with each other, learn from each other, and process the trauma that they're taking on, because it's a lot to carry the trauma of a whole community and help them move through it. And I will leave off at that, and we can talk more if you want to in the halls. I have 3 more pages that I didn't get to. But thank you for listening.
All right, it's question time, and just as a reminder, at the end of this, 4 p.m. is a 30-minute break. So try to be back on time if you want to be. All right, let's go with the first question. I'm going to ask a version of it, because I can tell there's like some skepticism built into the question, and it has an assumption that may not be true. So I'm going to ask a version of the question. Does the Healing Advocacy Fund work with the Oregon Health Authority? And if so, how is it going? And they're also curious if some of the topics are public, or is it a public meeting? I think you can kind of get a sense of what they're asking. Sure. So how's that process?
Yeah, I can. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, the Healing Advocacy Fund meets with everyone. Everyone is a very wide spectrum. So that is the Oregon Health Authority, that is community stakeholders, that is local state government agencies from the OLCC to the Department of Agriculture. One of our tasks is to be able to provide resources for everyone at every level, and there are a lot of people. And so it is a challenge to try and provide the resources to all of the stakeholders that we can. We don't have all the resources either. Like, let me be honest. We are not pretending that we have the answers. What we have is a container and a capacity to help provide meaningful connections and tables that can be set for other people to help lead those conversations. We cannot create this program that we're all envisioning without putting the people who we're talking about at the table in the driver's seat. And so that involves a whole level of engagement of which we are attempting to do our best on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. All right, so let's go on to another excellent question. Do you think it's important for facilitators to have experience of a deep psilocybin experience themselves before becoming a trained practitioner or a guide?
Is that for anybody? I'll talk.
I can start. I think there is a personal opinion and a professional opinion about what's practical. I feel like there are so many people at these Horizons conferences who have said, I don't know how I would feel sitting with a facilitator who doesn't have their own experience, and yet you can't mandate in any training program or anywhere else that someone take a scheduled substance. What I can say is that if you are someone who is looking for a facilitator, look up where they're being trained and look up how their training was conducted. Each of these training programs has what's called a practicum that's at least 40 hours minimum to qualify to train M109 facilitators. So you can ask them more about that experience. You can ask them to disclose what their experience is. I will say that also there are probably facilitators out there, in my personal, not professional opinion, who have taken lots of psychedelics are not the best facilitators, and vice versa. So I think it's all just part of a larger consideration set.
Thank you. All right, what do systems of accountability look like? Will there be a disciplinary board component overseeing licensees or restorative practices in place to heal harm?
Do you want to start? I can.
Another easy question.
Could you say the question one more time?
Yeah, what do systems of accountability look like? And I assume they're talking about Measure 109, Oregon Psilocybin Services framework. So what do systems of accountability look like? Will there be a disciplinary board component overseeing licensees and then kind of separate or restorative practices in place to heal harm?
Sure. I'm happy to start. So one of the things about creating a new system for the first time is that there are a lot of questions about who are the most credible people that we can rely on to look to help adjudicate issues, right? We don't really have that from the traditional sense as the psychology board, right, has a long history of helping navigate their licensees' issues, right? We are starting to see a lot of these types of models pop up, especially at the federal level with MDMA being so close to becoming FDA approved. But that is a different model than the Oregon model. And so the short answer is right now, all of the facilitator licensees under Measure 109, should there be license-related issues, will be dealing with the Oregon Health Licensing Board. This is a board that deals with many different license types, hundreds, I believe, across the state, where they do not have their own individualized licensing authority to go to. So that's probably one of the least known facts about Measure 109, and one of the most common questions is that who is the regulating authority if and when there are issues between licensees and or issues between licensees and clients. There's absolutely an accountability licensing board there, and we need to continue to strive to work with the organizations at the national level to learn from them about how over time we can start to build that structure that is more specific for psychedelics and psilocybin here in Oregon. We know that we're gonna need that kind of focus and that kind of specialization because nothing else like this exists yet, and we're gonna need to build that.
And so I'll add on top of that, in addition to what's written in the measure and the rules and regulations, there's the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association, and there's the Board of Psychedelic Medicines and Therapies. You can look both of those up. They're both in formation right now. I think both those teams are phenomenal, and they're working at a national level to really work out how this is going to work, not just for the state ballot initiatives, but also, of course, all the FDA clinical trial tracks. So ideally, in my dream world, and we are in conversations with both these organizations on this topic, we have one national board and one professional association that really regulates from an industry perspective a lot of this, that will I'm hoping, consider including things like, I forget the wording you used, Nate, but mediating ethical violations and taking away board certifications and so on. That's all in process, but I think that would be much better than having a lot of different professional associations or different boards that you have to be compliant with separately. I mean, my ideal state would be that if you are certified in Oregon, let's say this is 20 years from now, you are also able to qualify to work in other states and in other jurisdictions if you have those certifications with one, standards of care, standards of training, and so on.
Dr. Carter, you touched on this a little bit, and maybe you can offer a little bit more context or what you hope to see around here. So the question is, to what extent are there efforts to use cannabis taxes to support OHA psilocybin services?
So there was a bill proposed in the last short session to use some of the cannabis tax dollars to create an equity group specifically focused on psilocybin services. That did not pass in this last short session, but it may come back around in the long session starting next year. I am torn on this because I recognize how important the treatment and access to treatment for people struggling with substance use is, and I am grateful that that funding has been largely focused in Measure 110. But again, treatment is a Band-Aid. What we really need to do is keep the trauma from happening in the first place. And in order to do that, like I said, we have a lot of work to do to change the systems. And I would love to see some of that going towards education for young people on substances in general, on substance use disorder, as it were, the diagnosis. Don't like the term, I prefer substance use disharmony. But as far as the funds being specifically utilized for psilocybin services, that's the only place that I know of where there is an active attempt to use some of those funds for improving psilocybin services at this point. There may be more coming. There may be a way to bring Measure 109 and 110 together a whole lot more, because it is a very effective management for a lot of different issues that do lead to substance use that is harmful. But we'll see. We'll see in the next few years.
Thanks. And is it right that Measure 110 changed the cannabis tax formula so that is it any proceeds over $100 million collected goes towards, and so that's the pot of funds you're talking about that could be used for services eventually or potentially?
Yes.
Okay.
So in this last biennium, Measure 110 received about $302 million that were cannabis tax funds. I think it's anything over
Some amount.
It's a certain number that I do not have in my head right now, but yeah, anything over that amount goes to.
So Oregonians should consume more cannabis? Is that? Full disclosure, I have a farm. That's not like I'm not trying to do any self-dealing. I'm just.
I mean, cannabis is also a very effective healing tool, and I mean, it seems useful to me to use the taxes that go from cannabis use to helping people who are struggling with more harmful substance use.
It's beautiful. It's symbiotic in a lot of ways. All right, back into the mechanics of the measure and kind of the statewide rollout. Is there a path to opt back in for counties or cities that they opt out to opt back in the future if they opt out?
Yes.
All right, next question.
There is an ability to do that, and the council or the commission can decide to do that at their own prerogative. I think we're working on educating several localities right now into where whether it's because it's good education or they realize that they're going to lose at the ballot, even though they're putting it on the ballot. There's other options there, but we do feel look, like there's a lot of these counties that are and cities that are opting out. Again, these are opportunities for the counties who are not opting out and the cities that are not opting out to lead the way, right? I am impressed with how many cities and counties are moving forward. If you would have asked me to guess, I would not have ballparked 1/4 the amount of localities and cities that are moving forward with this. And it's our job to provide them the resources and the path to do it right. So we're just getting started on that. There's a lot of work to do.
Cool. And folks are asking how they can be involved, how they can inform people in their counties.
Yeah, if you are an operator, either way, in a city or a county that is going to be on the ballot or not, you need to be contacting your elected officials and you need to be getting meetings with planners right now, even in areas that are going on the ballot. Should it fail at the ballot, they're going to have, and they haven't been working on crafting time, place, and manner regulations, they're going to have Christmas break to figure that out. Not going to happen, right? So now is an opportunity to help really inform those planners and those electeds on these are what reasonable time, place, and manner regulations look like. Here are the considerations that you have as a local government. Allow us, the operators, to share our vision with you so you don't go screw it up. That's a lot of the very basic communication that needs to happen between operators and the people in which we'll be regulating them. We have an opportunity to set the stage that we want to see, but it's going to require a lot of legwork at the local level and a lot of meetings, and there's going to be bumps in the road, but it's worthwhile now. If we do not set that foundation now, it's going to be incredibly hard to set once things are already moving in motion, or unfortunately, God forbid, the wrong direction.
When sourcing mushrooms, how do growers ensure they are following proper regulations? What are the growing regulations? I think they're talking about a licensed psilocybin cultivator under Measure 109. Want to offer a little tidbit about that?
You sure?
As
Angie,
in
do you want?
Spore? As in getting spores? Or
I think they're talking about within Measure 109.
This is like how,
I don't think they're asking like, where can I get mushrooms? I mean, that's okay if they do.
if you're here,
Ask me later if you want, but I'm just, when sourcing mushrooms, how do growers ensure they're following proper regulations? So maybe just a tidbit about the license program. How do you grow government thumbed up mushrooms?
Yeah, no, I can give a canned answer. First, read the measure. Second, be a part of the rules process. Third, develop SOPs and protocols for running a business that include the information that is in the regulations, right? I think that, we really are incredibly lucky. As someone who has worked with the Oregon Health Authority for over a decade on various drug policy issues, I cannot say with more confidence now than ever before that we have an ally in the folks at the regulating agency to help us do this right. Are we going to get it perfect out of the gate? No. I'd be concerned if we did, to be honest, because I don't think that exists for this type of model. But I do think that from the resources and the help that we can get from the agency, from the resources that experienced psilocybin operators and experienced people who know how to run businesses can come together, those are the types of spaces that we're trying to create to allow for a sharing of experience to create the highest quality model we can create that also includes the most access for people who need, access immediately, that stand to benefit the most. So I think it's a little bit of a simple answer is specialization and harmony within the community to be able to trade and exchange those resources to lift all boats. Excellent.
Is time up? Can we do one more question, or should we close it? There's so many good questions in there. We can be done. I want to ask you all how you fell in love with mushrooms, but I'm assuming that you've fallen in love. Time's up, so let's close it. Break is 30 minutes, and we have an excellent program continuing. Thank you all. Thanks to this panel of rock stars.